Free, but with limits. Cambodia's opposition leader is released from house arrest, but his colleagues face hurdles as they try to return from exile. Can they maintain pressure on the Prime Minister despite a government crackdown? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Nastasya Tay. Cambodia's Prime Minister Hun Sen has silenced nearly all voices of dissent in recent years. His government has shut down independent media and dissolved the main opposition, Cambodia National Rescue Party, or CNRP. Now, a prominent CNRP leader has been freed after a year of house arrest. But Kem Sokha still faces severe restrictions and is banned from leaving the country. Meanwhile, his colleagues, including prominent party co-founder Sam Rainsy, are facing challenges of their own as they try to return to Cambodia from exile. And this is all happening as the government faces international pressure for undermining democracy and human rights. We'll bring in our guests in just a moment, but first, this report from Wayne Hay, who's in Phnom Penh.
The president of the opposition Cambodia National Rescue Party spent his first full day of relative freedom still in his home in the capital Phnom Penh. He met diplomats. The first was the ambassador of France, which is one of the countries applying most pressure on the Cambodian government. Kem Sokha didn't talk to the media, but his spokesman said the meetings were an opportunity to say thank you.
It's just to pay a visit, to express greetings and to interact in a personal level.
Kem Sokha is still banned from political activities and the charge of treason against him stands. The decision to end his house arrest came the day after the acting president of his party, Sam Rainsy, flew into Malaysia from exile in France, saying he'll return to Cambodia. Heavy security has been deployed on the streets of Phnom Penh as a warning to anyone thinking of helping him achieve his stated goal of overthrowing the government. On Tuesday, the European Union will deliver a report to Prime Minister Hun Sen's government outlining its concerns over a decline in democracy and human rights. It's threatening to withdraw Cambodia's preferential trade agreement if significant improvements aren't made. But the ruling party says the court's decision on Kem Sokha was not made in response to that threat.
This is the opinion of outlawed rebels who have always taken up the issue of the Cambodian government. Kem Sokha's case is under the control of the courts, so it's not relevant.
The developments come in the middle of an important holiday in Cambodia, the annual water festival. Politics is absent as crews and boats from around the country converge on the capital to mark the end of the wet season, when the Tonle Sap River changes direction. Even if the government is able to appease the European Union, there are big question marks over whether there will be any significant space in the short term for the Cambodia National Rescue Party. Prime Minister Hun Sen has tried very hard to destroy the threat posed by the opposition. That undoing the damage completely now seems unlikely. Still, the members of the banned party see the international pressure and attention as an opportunity to try to restart their political careers and resume their campaign to change this country's direction. Wayne Hay, Phnom Penh for Inside Story.
Now, that crackdown on the opposition Cambodia National Rescue Party, or CNRP, intensified after it made gains in elections in 2013 and 2017. Party co-founder Sam Rainsy went into self-exile. He's been convicted of several crimes in absentia, charges his supporters say are all politically motivated. Fellow co-founder of the CNRP, Kem Sokha, was arrested for treason more than 2 years ago. The Supreme Court dissolved the National Rescue Party in the run-up to last year's general election. Several independent media outlets have been forced to shut down, and dozens of CNRP supporters have been arrested this year, accused of plotting to overthrow Prime Minister Hun Sen. Well, let's bring in our guests now. In Kuala Lumpur, we're privileged to have Sam Rainsy, acting president of the Cambodia National Rescue Party. On Skype from Singapore, there's Graham Ong Webb, who's a research fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies. And also on Skype from Bangkok, Benjamin Zawaki, who's an independent Southeast Asia analyst and author. Welcome to you all. Mr. Rainsy, I have to start with the big question here. Do you plan to return to Cambodia despite the threat of near certain arrest when you get there?
Definitely. We will go back to Cambodia. It is not only our right, but it's our duty to go back to our country, to our home country.
How soon could we see you go back to Cambodia, and how do you plan to get there? There have been a number of logistical challenges so far.
Things can change because we are combining internal pressure with external pressure on the Hun Sen regime so that they will let us in a peaceful way. We will go back to Cambodia.
Mr. Rainsy, talk me through your decision to return to Cambodia at this time, because I know you set a self-deadline almost of the 9th of November, and we are having this European Union decision that we will hear about on Tuesday about the preferential trade agreement. And you talked about internal and external pressure. So is this a strategic time then for you to go back to Cambodia in the hope that you might be able to leverage some of that for some change?
Yes, very much so. Had the Thai government not blocked me prevented me from going back to Cambodia, I would have been in Cambodia already by the 9th of November. But now there is another date, important date, is when the European Union is going to release their report and make their decision whether to suspend the system of trade privileges or not. And this is a very powerful leverage to put pressure on the Hun Sen regime to restore democracy.
So, Mr. Rainsy, then let me ask you the question again. When do you expect to return to Cambodia?
It can be any time because the population is still mobilized. Our network is ready and the international pressure is mounting. So we are at a turning point, I would say at a tipping point.
You talk about this tipping point. It's also a tipping point potentially for the CNRP. I know Kem Sokha has now been released from house arrest, but he is still facing restrictions and isn't allowed to participate in politics. I know you and he have had some differences of opinion in the past. So where do you see your role in the party now?
We will call for a popular uprising. If Hun Sen does not restore democracy, then there will be international sanction. Factories will be closed. Workers, hundreds of thousands of workers will lose their job. Then we will call on those factory workers and their families to rise up. It is because of Hun Sen that they lose their job. If we don't do anything, they will lose their job. So we have to do our best to preserve the jobs of hundreds of thousands of workers and the livelihoods of their families.
When you say you're calling for a popular uprising, then, is there a concern that there could be violence? We have seen this crackdown on the part of the government, and now you're asking potentially thousands of people to come out onto the street, and there has been a lot of violence in Cambodia in its history. Could there be a civil war?
No. We will follow the example of the Filipino people in 1996 when there was a peaceful popular uprising forcing the dictator at that time, Ferdinand Marcos, to flee the country. I think this can happen in Cambodia, with Hun Sen also fleeing the country under the pressure from the crowd.
Let me ask you this then, Mr. Rainsy. At a time of great tension in Cambodia, you faced criticism from some people who have questioned your courage about not returning from self-imposed exile, and you still haven't yet managed to make it back to the country. What would you say to those people?
I did return, as promised, on the 19th July 2013. It was a successful return, and I was welcomed by hundreds of thousands of people, and we made significant gain at the election that took place 10 days later. Had the election been honest and transparent, free and fair, we would have won already. So in the meantime, the popular discontent against the Hun Sen regime has increased. So the people are really waiting for a change, a positive change, a democratic change. They are waiting for a signal. The signal will be the return of the CNRP, the opposition leadership. Once we are in the country, there will be a popular uprising. We call on the army not to shoot at us and to turn their gun against the dictator. So this will be really the turning of the tipping point.
Well, at this tipping point, I'm going to broaden out the discussion. Graham, let me ask you, as someone who's been watching Cambodian politics from outside of the country, how united in your mind is the Cambodian opposition now, and is an uprising like this possible?
Well, I think any outside observer of Cambodia, whether they've been in the country or whether they've been watching from the near abroad within the region, can't quite say what the level of support is. I mean, we know the support is significant. If I'm not wrong, figures put it at about 3 million supporters for the CNRP. And with the Cambodian government's dismantlement of the CNRP a few years ago, you can't wish away 3 million supporters just like that. And there's also a sense from various respects that Cambodian youth may be very well aspiring for change in line with a global zeitgeist, if you like, for more space for the freedom of expression, which comes at loggerheads with the slightly older demographic within the region. So I think there are grounds to suppose that there is support for the CNRP. But of course, we only when the rubber hits the road, when Sam Rainsy makes his successful return, should we see what that kind of support that engenders.
Benjamin, let me throw that question at you, because the next election will actually only be in 2023, right? But give me a read on your take on the political atmosphere in the country at the moment. If an election were to happen tomorrow, would we see Hun Sen hold on to power?
Well, that depends on whether or not the voice of the people would be allowed to stand. I mean, what's very interesting is the surveys that have been conducted of late among people, and what they show is that the population, for the large part, supports the kind of pressure being placed on the Hun Sen government by the EU, as Mr. Rainsy said, and also by the United States. The preliminary results, or at least the results that were not allowed to stand in the 2018 election, suggest that Hun Sen would be under considerable pressure domestically, as well as mentioned internationally, to cede results to the opposition party, which is one of the reasons I think he's breathing much more easily, knowing that he doesn't need to stand again for three or four more years at this point. So the domestic and external pressure will have some more time to work on the situation there.
Well, so let's talk about this timing. Graham, I do want to ask you about this timing around the EU decision to potentially remove this trade deal with Cambodia, which could potentially affect up to 1/3 of Cambodian exports. So right now, do you think that this is a potential diplomatic sleight of hand to try to get Kem Sokha out of house arrest, get everyone looking the other way, say, look, this is a relaxation of restrictions, we are opening up to democratic change potentially, so please don't take away our trade partnership?
Definitely, of course, this is all well timed. I mean, this is a calculated chess move, not only by the Cambodian government, in response to these increasing pressures by the European Union, and presumably by a stretch by the Trump administration, but not so much. And of course, the CNRP, led by Sam Rainsy and others, in order to time it to their strategic advantage. I mean, so if things are timed the way Sam Rainsy intends, then of course, upon returning to Cambodia, and presumably, if I could say so, he touch wood, I hope he doesn't get arrested, but if he does get arrested, of course, that will be a game changer in terms of the response by the EU. They will see this very harshly, and they will presumably trigger these sanctions or the freezing of the preferential trade status that Cambodia now enjoys.
Benjamin, so this trade agreement, the everything but arms trade agreement, if that is dropped, who will then suffer the most? Because as Mr. Rainsy was saying there is a large amount of lower income workers within the garment industry. Presumably they're going to lose their jobs. Will it have the intended effect when it comes to political change, or could it just mean a huge amount of economic suffering?
Well, it really depends. I mean, when you look at the international situation, for example, China could make a move to step in and try to mitigate against the ill effects on the average person should that the trade preferences be dropped. China is at the moment the largest trading partner with Cambodia. It's its largest foreign investor. It's its single largest bilateral donor. It happens to be its largest source of foreign tourism. The Belt Road Initiative, China's signature international policy, has been largely embraced within Cambodia, at least at the top, through the Sihanoukville Special Economic Zone and a related highway. And so it's definitely possible that if the local economy and local people are hurt either by EU or US sanctions relating to trade preferences, the same things are being considered by the US Congress as are being considered by the European Union. It's possible that China will seek to further deepen its influence in the country by filling that void and stepping in and trying to give enough aid to not only to mitigate the ill effects of that, but also to turn the tide of the public opinion that I mentioned earlier, whereby you have a population that's largely in support of the pressure that's being applied to Hun Sen, even if the government itself is resisting that pressure.
Mr. Rainsy, you've been talking to various different Western powers about change in Cambodia, and you've also been watching the Cambodia-China relationship grow closer and closer in recent years. How much has that changed things? Has that given you some leverage in terms of encouraging perhaps Western nations who might want to curtail Chinese influence in the region to maybe get a little bit more proactive about what's happening in Cambodia?
Yes, this is a real source for concern. Cambodia is becoming a Chinese colony. For the first time, we see China sending hundreds of thousands of settlers. They are not ordinary tourists. They have come to Cambodia to stay, to settle there. So we are very worried. And they come, they bribe the authorities to take our land, to take our jobs. They behave as if they were the master of the land. So the Cambodian people are very upset. And on top of that, the Hun Sen government have given China a lot of facilities. And those facilities can be turned into military facilities overnight, very quickly. So it is not only a source of concern for economic reason, but it is a source of tension in the region. This can threaten peace and stability in the region. It is why the issue of restoring democracy in Cambodia and the issue of maintaining Cambodia's neutrality, preventing China from building military capacity in Cambodia is interrelated. Hun Sen has chosen to be on China's side. This is a danger, not only for Cambodia, but for the whole region. So restoring democracy in Cambodia means also ensuring Cambodia's neutrality and independence and preventing any foreign power from building any military facility in Cambodia.
Mr. Rainsy, you're talking about increasing regional tensions there. You're currently in Malaysia. And Malaysia and Cambodia are both members of ASEAN, and ASEAN has a policy of non-interference in each other's affairs. But I see that Malaysia has detained a number of opposition members from your party in the last few days at the request of Phnom Penh. Do you think that ASEAN as a body is doing enough to pressure Cambodia?
Things are changing. I think the values of democracy, of human rights, are being promoted more and more clearly by a number of ASEAN countries. I'm thinking of Malaysia, I'm thinking of Indonesia. So I think things are changing. And I'm very grateful to the Malaysian government for allowing the CNRP leadership to be on Malaysia's soil. Even though this makes Hun Sen very angry, but they have made it clear that Malaysia is an independent country, and Malaysia want to uphold universal values of human rights and democracy. And Malaysia set a good example when the opposition won the last election. This gave a lot of hope to the Cambodian people because of the similarities between the two countries.
Well, I see here actually that Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad did actually say in the last few days that Malaysia doesn't want to be used as a base for political activists or to interfere, and it has stuck by that policy for some time now. Graham, I see you nodding there. Do you have the same take? What is ASEAN doing within the context of what's happening in Cambodia?
Well, I'm sure that Sam Rainsy is very appreciative of the hostmanship he's receiving from the Malaysian authorities right now. But I respectfully disagree with him with regards to the so-called climate of hope within ASEAN vis-a-vis the support for human rights, in the region. I think we have slipped back because of this climate of deepening authoritarianism across various ASEAN countries. So Malaysia may very well be an exception to the rule, although I'm not quite sure there. But right now, I think in terms of timing, he might not find much advantage in terms of ASEAN support. I mean, right now, with the Rodrigo Duterte administration in the Philippines, there's a tightening up there in terms of the tightening military grip of the Thai military junta in Thailand. Not very much hope there as well. And also in places like Laos and Vietnam, which are rather closed systems. Singapore, many external observers will question whether or not it's become more democratic. There's been a tightening of political rule in my country. And so I think this is a very poor climate in terms of the support that Cambodia could well receive if democratic change is in the cards for the country.
Benjamin, let me throw that question about hope to you as well, because I see that Hun Sen vowed just last year that he was going to rule for another decade. And then just a month ago, I believe, he announced that his eldest son, Hun Manet, would be the possible future leader of Cambodia. And he is a very strong man in the military there. So could we see a continuation of the Hun political dynasty here? Or is there hope for change?
Well, we certainly could see the continuation. He's only 66 years old. He's been exclusively in power for 22 years, and he shows very little sign of loosening his grip. I would agree with Graham that if you're looking at ASEAN as the answer, you're probably looking in the wrong place. It's been historically difficult for ASEAN to speak with a single voice on any major rights issue. Far easier it has been for them to speak with a collective silence. You look over the past 2 years at the genocide that's taken place in Myanmar, about which ASEAN has done very little, and looking eastward in the South China Sea, ASEAN has been ineffective and ineffectual at speaking with a single voice at Chinese encroachment in the South China Sea. And I would add that Cambodia has really aided and abetted China in all of that. It has several times frustrated and at least once blocked ASEAN from issuing a joint communique about the South China Sea at the request of China. China essentially leaning on Cambodia as ASEAN chair at the time and saying, we don't want ASEAN to be speaking with a single voice on this. It has very much been China's MO within the region to sort of divide and influence within ASEAN, and Cambodia has been a very willing accomplice to that.
Let me ask just one last question then to Mr. Rainsy. At this point, do you personally, having been out of the country for all these years and potentially returning very soon, do you feel hopeful for your country at this stage?
Yes, very much so, because there is not only the issue of restoring democracy in Cambodia, but the issue of China's expansionist policy. With democracy restored in Cambodia, Cambodia will be a factor of peace, and Cambodia will not allow China to build any military facilities. I think this consideration has opened the discussion about Cambodia.
And we will leave it there for now. It's a story we'll be continuing to watch very closely. Thank you to all of our guests, Sam Rainsy, Graham Ongweb and Benjamin Zawaki. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, do go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Nastasya Tay, and the whole team here in Doha. Bye for now.